Welcome to The Hill. We hope you enjoy this week's message.
Okay. Well, if you're a visitor here, I just want to say you're really welcome from me personally. I understand, I don't know what your background is. Some of you will be people who have been following Jesus Christ for a number of years. Some of you may not have been that long at all. Some of you may have no faith whatsoever. But I guess all of us, if we've had any dealings with the Bible, and again, some of you may not have, but if you dip into the Bible, it won't take you very long to come across something in the Bible that is not particularly popular in our culture, not particularly popular in our city. And if I'm honest, if that's true for the city and our culture, then it's also true for the people in this room, including myself and my own heart. And there have been many times when I've read the Bible, and as I've discussed these things with other people, I've often said to them, I wish it didn't say that, but it does. And it's a battle, and it's a struggle. And there are many times, therefore, where I've just read things and just thought, gosh, that is a hard thing. That is tough. That is tough. It's making demands on my body. It's making demands on my time. It's making demands on my thinking. It's making demands on my money. It's making demands on where I live and how I use my days. The Christian author Tim Keller said this: only if God can say things that make you struggle will you know that you have met a real God and not a God that is a figment of your imagination. Only if God can say things that make you struggle will you know that you have met a real God and not a God that is a figment of your imagination. And I want to encourage you, and I say this knowing that this is a struggle and a battle that I've lived with myself ever since choosing to follow Christ 20 odd years ago, was this: you've got to in following Jesus, you've got to embrace that struggle, and you've got to allow the Bible to win in your life. Now you may say, well, do I or don't I? And hopefully as we unpack what I'm speaking about today, you'll see why that might be the case and why Jesus encourages us to embrace the struggle and allow God and the Bible to win in our lives. Because it's not a new fight. This isn't a new fight. What you're going through, and if you're struggling as you've read the Bible, if you're struggling as you've had God speak to you over certain topics, even your own life, you will discover that it's not a new fight. It's in the book of Mark, and I've been working my way through the book of Mark, and I'm going to give you an illustration of where that fight took place. And Jesus speaks into that very fight. The context is, we'll come to it in a second, but it's in Mark chapter 8. So we're kind of halfway through now, the story in the book of Mark. And Mark is written from Peter's perspective. And he's speaking to a guy, John Mark, and he's saying, record these things, get them down. This is what I remember about Jesus. This is what I remember happened when I was walking and following Jesus. And the context at this point, right up to this point, is stuff like this. 4,000 people have been fed with very little food in terms of a miracle. People are being healed. Jesus is popular. The disciples, quite frankly, if you think about it, if you were with him, you'd be loving it at this point. You're in the inner circle. You're in the circle of trust. You are popular. You are loved. Everybody knows when you're in town. Everybody wants to be around you. Everybody wants to be at the house that you're staying at and all that kind of stuff. It is good. Christianity at this point, following Jesus, you could argue has never been better. It's amazing. It must produce a warm glow. And then we come to this moment, therefore, of all this is going on, and they're seeing people healed, and they're seeing loads of people fed, and they're seeing Jesus like, wow, great stuff. And we come to this moment, therefore, in Mark, as they're walking along the road, the disciples and Jesus, and we're going to pick it up in Mark 8:27, where it says, Jesus and his disciples left Galilee. He's just healed a blind man. That's pretty cool, yeah? And they went up to the villages near Caesarea Philippi. As they were walking along, Jesus asked them, who do people say I am? And the disciples reply, well, some say you're John the Baptist, some say you're Elijah, and he's a guy from a long way back that the Israelites were waiting for. And others say you're one of the other prophets. Then Jesus did that question to them. He says, yeah, but who do you say I am? Who do you say I am? And remember, Peter is here. He's recording this story, remembering this. He's remembering this moment. This is Peter's moment. It's not a difficult question for Peter. Who do you say I am, Peter? And Peter says, you are the Messiah. Now, at this point, Jesus warns them not to tell anyone because he's not into spoilers and he knows what's coming and he doesn't want everybody to know what's coming. But at this point, Peter gets it. He goes, well, I know who you are. You're the Messiah. I'm loving it. Now, I know what the Messiah means. The Messiah is the one that's been promised. He's the Savior. He's coming. And you look like him. And this is good news. And this is really good. You're the Messiah. And you've got to remember, even though now Peter is reflecting and remembering this story, at this point, Peter only knew up to that point. He didn't know the end from the beginning. In his mind at that point, as we will see, this was happy, clappy Christianity at its best. Things were looking good. Things were looking good. He had a good year ahead. Things were very popular. The brand was growing. Jesus was doing really well. And you are the Messiah. And he has no doubt that he has discovered the real deal. But he didn't have the full story. And out of nowhere, Jesus begins to tell them that the Son of Man, this is Jesus in verse 31, must suffer many terrible things and be rejected by the elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of religious law. He would be killed, and 3 days later he would rise from the dead. As he talked about this openly with his disciples, Peter took him aside and began to reprimand him for saying such things. You see, Peter's mistake at this point was the Jesus he knew and the Jesus he was following and the Jesus he was seeing was only, as it were, 50% of the Jesus that had come. And here Jesus says to him, but you don't understand. I may be the Messiah, but I'm going to get killed. I'm going to suffer terribly. I'm going to be beaten. And all this popularity and all this success isn't going to feel like it then. And in verse 32, it says that he told them this openly. In other words, another translation said this. Jesus said it plainly. There is no doubt whatsoever that Peter heard it and understood it for what it was. That the Son of Man must suffer. And this was Peter's struggle. This was Peter's struggle, wasn't it? Because he wasn't expecting that. That wasn't the Christianity he'd signed up for. There was no room for suffering, no room for difficulty, no room for rejection, no room for that kind of stuff in his Christianity, in his following Jesus, in his understanding of the Messiah. This is not a new fight. When you open up the Bible and you read something you don't want to read, this isn't a new fight. If it happened for Peter, it can happen for us. No way. We don't want that. I don't want to read that, God. That's not what I want you to say. I want you to say this. I want to stay popular. I want to stay relevant with our culture. I want to be this. I want to be that. And here the Bible opens up and God speaks and you want to go, no. I don't want it to make those kind of demands on me. And maybe we don't do it quite like this. But maybe we can understand what happens when Peter takes Jesus aside, takes God aside, and began to reprimand him for saying such things. I've said this before and I'll say it again. These are the memoirs of Peter. Why did he tell us that story? He doesn't come out very well, does he, of it? It gets worse in a minute. It doesn't come out well. Why? Because I think he wants to shout down the pages of history, listen to my error. Listen to my mistake. Listen to my struggle. Listen to my battle. Hear what Jesus said to me. I got the right God, but I got the wrong understanding. I had the wrong view of God. And I think whenever we face this fight, whenever we open up the Bible, whenever we try and understand who God is and whenever he speaks to us from the Bible, we have a fight going on. And there's kind of two views of this fight. And we come to this now in verse 33. Jesus says it and he doesn't mess around. Jesus turned around and looked at his disciples. Then he reprimanded Peter. Get away from me, Satan. You are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not from God's. In other words, when we face these struggles, when Peter was facing these struggles, there were two views of this fight. There were the cheap seats. And Peter was in the cheap seats. And I often find myself in the cheap seats. And you might find yourself in the cheap seats. These are the human seats. And we look at it and we go, no way. I can't be having that. I can't be doing that. I can't agree to that. And Jesus says, but there are other seats for you in this fight. These are the best seats. And they're God's seats. And he says, you need to change your seat allocation, Peter. You need to move from the human viewpoint and you need to see things from God's viewpoint. Now, we might say at this point, well, this is okay because that was Peter's mistake. And some of us in the room might be reflecting, going, actually, do I make that mistake? Is that a struggle I have? But then something dramatic happens. And I think as plainly as I understand that the Bible operates, suddenly Jesus turns and speaks to us all. We stop looking at Peter and now we look at ourselves. Because what happens then in verse 34, then calling the crowd to join his disciples, he says this: if any one of you wants to be my follower, you must turn from your selfish ways, take up your cross and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, you will save it. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than your soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my message in these adulterous and sinful days, the Son of Man will be ashamed of that person when he returns in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. These are Jesus' words to the whole crowd. The whole crowd. And there are four things that go on in this particular set of verses. First of all, there's a command. Give up your own way. Take up your cross and follow me. It's a command. Jesus says that, and that's what I require of you. Then there's a warning. If you try to hang on to your life, you'll lose it. He's warning them. Then there's a promise. If you give up your life for my sake, you will save it. And then there's a question. Is anything worth more than your soul? So I want to work backwards on those things. I want to look at the question, I want to look at the promise, I want to look at the warning, and I want to look at the command. The question. That's a good question to ask ourselves. Jesus is asking us that question. He's asking me that question. Is there anything worth more than my soul? Anything that I have placed in a higher position than my relationship with Jesus Christ. Anything. Is it my happiness? Is it to grow old, be healthy? Is it to get rich, get more gold? What is it? Anything. Anything. That would include then family, include where I live, how I live. It's just anything. It's a good question to be asked. It's not much fun. And I think the truth is our answer will largely depend upon which seats we sit. That's the truth. And I think there's a desire in us, isn't there, to try, if we really do want to get from the cheap seats to the best seats. We wouldn't be here if we didn't. I do go and watch the Swans, and I'm desperately trying to move my seats into the best seats in the ground. That's my ambition. I know what they are as well. I've studied the Liberty long and hard. We want to get to the best seats. And our answer, therefore, depends on where we sit. And in one way of understanding of where we sit, maybe I can ask it like this. Do you see death as a full stop or a comma? You die. One day every man and woman will die. One day we will breathe in, breathe out, and not breathe in again. Full stop, comma. That's a good way of checking your seat allocation. As for me, that is. Jesus says in verse 38, this is an eternal decision. I've spent this weekend moving. I work in Cardiff, or I did work in Cardiff, and I'm going to start work in Newport tomorrow morning. We've moved office, and I've been responsible for this office move where I work for the last year. And we did all the moving on Friday, and all the boxes and the removal company come in. And it's interesting, we actually are moving from a rather sort of kind of does what it does, it's okay building, into a really nice building. And so I'm not quite saying it's earth and heaven, but some people might claim that. And as we've made that move, you watch people's understanding as they've moved in, seen this building, they're blown away by what they've gone from to what they're going to. And as they've done that, of course, they've made strategic decisions about what they're going to leave behind. But for many of them, they've, one, not really known when the move is exactly going to take place. They've not known really what they're going to. And they don't really know what's there, so they don't always know what's going to be needed to be left behind. I've been in the advantage, therefore, of this move being in the best seats. I've known all along. So it was easy for me to make the move. And what really people wanted to do and have done throughout the process is they've come to me and spoken to me to try to identify what they need to leave behind and what they need to take with them. Well, that's what we do with the Bible. We engage and we listen from someone who's got the best seats and says it's a comma, not a full stop. Do you not understand? Is there anything worth more than your soul? In the end, everything will go back in the box at the end. Packed up, and so much of it will be left in the old office. So much of it. Good things. All good things. They served their purpose where in Cardiff we were working. But they won't serve us anymore in Newport. Who would have thought Cardiff would be used? We can do that, can't we? Earth. I'm not quite sure where we're at with Newport being heaven. But that's where the office move has taken place. So we should leave it with the Lord. We will leave good things behind, but we won't need them where we're going. Jesus makes a promise. If you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, you will find it. You will have a satisfying and full life. Short-changed Christianity just robs us of satisfaction. Short-changed Christianity just robs us of a satisfying life. Temporary pleasure, but it doesn't actually achieve what we want it to achieve. And Jesus says, if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, you will save it. In other words, there's a promise. You will have a satisfying full life. Now, this is in the context of suffering and difficulty and rejection, but it's still a promise. And there's a warning straight after that. Or sorry, just before that, if you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. In other words, if you try and hang on, if you try and place God second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh place, eighth place, ninth place, you will have an unsatisfactory life. There will be a tinge of dissatisfaction. If this was an issue for Peter, it's certainly an issue for Robin Vincent. And I'm grateful to this man, Peter, for saying, get this stuff down, that you will not make the mistake that I've made. And I have made it many times and many battles where you want to say, I think I'll put God second in this, not first. God first every time. That is where the satisfaction is, Jesus says. And there's that command, therefore, that he began the whole passage with, of that little passage, that little statement, give up your own way, pick up your cross, follow me, willingly give up, willingly put down, willingly leave behind, willingly reorder your thinking, whatever it may be. Nothing. Why? Check. If you've been following Jesus Christ and you don't feel you have ever reordered anything, you have never left anything behind, you have never given anything up, you have never willingly put something down, then my encouragement to you is this, as plainly as I can, check your seat allocation. Because I believe God calls us to that life. It will look different for different people, but there is something in that. It doesn't have to be big things. They can be good things as well. I'm not suggesting everybody's is the same, but there is a sense of the more you follow Jesus, I think you will get to a point where you will say, I've given up something. I've left behind something. I've put down something. I've willingly reordered my thinking around something. Because Jesus has said to me, give up your own way. Give up your own way. Pick up your cross and follow me. Commitment, surrender, submission. They're not popular things, are they? But like other things, they're all plainly in the Bible. And they appear to be at the heart of following the Messiah. Not Peter's Messiah, as it were, but God's Messiah. And this is as plainly as Jesus will ever speak in many respects. He says to them plainly, this is what will happen. And this is a command, and this is a warning, and this is a promise, and this is a question. Is there anything worth more than that? I want to finish with a kind of introduction really to a new series we're going to start at the end of February, and we've got some new people going to be teaching it. And it's called The Cloud, and it's really looking back at people in history, followers of Jesus in history. And we're going to take some lessons and from their lives and see how they've drawn on the scriptures and they've embraced this struggle. And we're going to learn from them. We're going to look at some characters and folk from history. And I'm just going to, by way of really introducing that Cloud series, will come and start in the end of Feb, and it will be intermittent, but it will be just good for us to look at different characters in history, different men and different women who've embraced the struggle of Mark 8, 34 to 38. And I wanted to do an introduction because it ties in with really what I'm saying today. And I want to introduce one such person. Hebrews 12 says, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us persevere. And I want to use this by way of finish, really. This guy called Nate Saint. Nate Saint was 33 years of old when he died on the 8th of January. So what was that? When was the 8th of January? Tuesday? Just gone by? He died on the 8th of January 1956, 73 years ago, 33 years of age. 33 years of age. He understood that death was a comma, not a full stop. Him and his 4 friends went to a remote part of the jungle in South America to try and reach one of the most dangerous tribes of Indians, who's basically every single member of the tribe would have had somebody who'd been murdered in their tribe because they were a waging, fighting tribe, and they would kill each other and kill relatives and things like that. And these men went from their comfortable lives, feeling the compelling call of God to go and do this. And they weren't reckless, they considered it, they planned it, they spent years preparing to do it. And they went. And they engaged with the tribe initially and it went well. And this was popular, successful Christianity. This was good Christianity. They probably felt like we're winning. And then they arranged on that 8th of January, I believe it was a Friday at 4 o'clock, they would meet some of the tribe again. And they were really excited. Within 24 hours, the wives back at their homes in the other part of the South America where they were, received no radio contact. Silence. And within a few days, it was discovered that they had been brutally murdered by the spear by these tribes, men and women. Cheap seats. What a waste. What a waste. Best seats. Mark 8, verse 34 to 38. Within 2 years, Nate Saint's son, Stephen, who was a young boy, went with his aunt and other family members and other missionaries and re-engaged with the tribe that had killed his father. Within a couple of years, they'd led them to Christ. Within a few years, there was a growing missionary movement of young men and women who realized that the example of these 5 young men was inspirational, was from the Bible, and they should follow it. And missionaries went all around the world as a consequence of them. Not only that, Stephen himself then began a relationship and got to know the very men and women who killed his father. And indeed, the man that killed his father, the one that speared his father, became the grandfather to Stephen's children. This is a witness from the cloud. Now, we won't be called to live that out necessarily in that way, but let us understand the deep truths that come from within that story, that speak of the passage in Mark 8. Jesus said to them, "Don't tell anyone yet, but there was a time coming when no one would take his life, but he would willingly give it." Jesus said, "No servant is greater than his master." Peter came to understand that. Nate Saint understood it. We need to embrace the struggle wherever we find it in the Bible and allow it to win in our life. It's not a new fight. We can sit in the cheap seats, or we can get a better seat allocation and see things from God's point of view. Is there anything worth more than our souls? If anyone is ashamed of me and my message in these adulterous and sinful days, the Son of Man will be ashamed of that person when he returns in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, you will save it. If any of you want to be my follower, you must turn from your selfish ways. Take up your cross and follow me.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you'd like to learn more about the Hill Church, please visit our website, the-hill.church. Or come and see us on Sunday at 4 p.m. in Matthew's house.